All right, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for taking the time to jump on the presentation today. We appreciate you taking time out of your day, and we'll go ahead and get started. So, to start things off, we want to provide the acknowledgement of HUD support for this presentation today, as this work and material has been funded under an award with the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. The substance and findings and work are dedicated to the public. Neither the United States government nor any of its employees makes any warranty, express or implied, or assumes any legal liability or responsibility for the accuracy, completeness, or usefulness of any information, apparatus, product, or process disclosed, or represents that would not infringe privately owned rights. References herein to any specific commercial product, process, or service by trade name, trademark, manufacturer, or otherwise does not necessarily constitute or imply its endorsed recommendation or favoring of the U.S. government or any agency thereof. Opinions expressed in this document are those of the authors and do not necessarily reflect the official position or a position that is endorsed by HUD or any HUD program. So our agenda for today is to provide information to housing authorities that have implemented various strategies to improve their program utilization. We will start today's presentation going through some introductions and then talk about success rate strategies, payment standard strategies, long-term utilization strategies, and utilization and operational best practices, followed by questions and a wrap-up. So any questions you have throughout the training, please place them in the chat and we will respond to the questions at the completion of the presentation. This presentation will be made available to all attendees or anybody who isn't in attendance today through HUD Exchange, and it will likely be available to you within the next 2 to 3 weeks. This is the fourth training of our summer series of focusing on utilization and operations. And so this is the final training of the summer as it relates to this. And you can find previous trainings that were provided throughout the summer on HUD tools, portability, project-based vouchers, and this presentation as well on the HUD Exchange. So with that, we'll start the introductions. My name is Mike Edens. I'm a VP with CVR Associates, former HCV director, been in the industry for over 18 years with lots of experience as it relates to the voucher program and all of its regulations surrounding it, specializing in HCV utilization, PBV, relocation, and HCV program administration. I'm joined today by some amazing panelists from the state of Alabama. With us today, we have Sonetta Williams from the Pritchard Housing Authority, Sharon Tolbert from the Housing Authority of the City of Auburn, Zulika Boykin from the Pritchard Housing Authority, Kanji Drake from the Housing Authority of Birmingham District, Magdalene Scretta from the Mobile Housing Board, Kalisha Pace from the Foley Housing Authority, and Joy Dumas from the Foley Housing Authority. And so today we're going to start by talking about success rate strategies, and our panelists will talk about some of the strategies that they have implemented within their voucher program that have improved their success rates. And so we will be starting today's presentation with Sharon Tolbert from the Auburn Housing Authority, who will talk to us about their efforts as it relates to landlord outreach. Sharon?
Hello, everyone, and thank you again, Mike, for the invitation. What I want to speak with you all today about is the Auburn Housing Authority's Landlord Symposium that we held on July 14th of 2022. The issues that we have in Auburn, we have a tight rental market. We're a college town, which results in minimal affordable housing opportunity and voucher utilization. So the reason we held the symposium was in hopes of educating property owners about the needs of voucher holders and the benefits of participating in the HCV program, coupled with removing any stigma there may be associated with the program as well. So the way we marketed the program, we did social media, news coverage, newspaper articles, Chamber of Commerce, and even door-to-door. Also, when it looks at our coordinated efforts and the feedback we received from the program, well, let me just kind of go through the attendees first. We had 43 attendees, 34 of those were on site, 9 was virtual. And it included property owners, we had other PHAs that attended, and we had community partners as well. Right now, we're still trying to assess the success of the program, or did it result in more landlords participating? Right now, that's unknown, and that's particularly because we really feel that it was intentional that we held the symposium for 2 reasons in July. One, we had about 60 or so vouchers that's on the street, or vouchers that we have issued to eligible applicants who was looking for housing. Also, we were in the process of pulling from our wait list and about 80 to 100 applicants to check for eligibility. So before we issued additional vouchers, we wanted to have the symposium for that reason. Say, hey, we have these number of families that are in the process of looking for housing and to utilize their vouchers. And we also have, in the next 30 days or so, more families to come. Coupled with, we wanted to get the information out there to property owners before the fall semester start with the students, so they can kind of start preparing of how many occupancies, occupied or unoccupied units that they have, and how they can utilize the program. Because quite frankly, Auburn has a lot of new great student developments in the private sector. Quite frankly, those developments are, and the rental units, the rent for those units is a lot more than our payment standards. However, most students want to go to the new best things. So that would leave some more established properties that could possibly be available, and that property owners may want to utilize to help if they have any occupancy issues. So with that being said, it's hard to kind of tell right now the impact the symposium may have had on our property owners, but until we'll be able to gauge that even better once the students are back, they're occupying the properties, and the property owners can say, hey, I have this information about the housing authority, I have these occupancy issues, and hopefully with that will result in more property owners taking part of the program, and we're able to assess our program even further. The different steps that we are taking, our next steps as a result of the landlord symposium, when it comes to increasing our staff, we are in the process of hiring a landlord liaison. The purpose of this position, for one, we do not have the capacity currently for our HCB caseworker to be the liaison between the voucher holder and the property owner to navigate through when a voucher is issued, and also for those who are current voucher holders that may have some other issues that need to be rectified. Because it can be overwhelming and challenging, I know, for our community, for our voucher holders, for 2 reasons. One, the voucher holder is new to this process, and going through all the nuances of utilizing the voucher, speaking with property owners on their need to utilize their voucher, that can be challenging. So our intent is to have that liaison to help them navigate that voucher process. And also for those current voucher holders, if there are any issues between the participant and the landlord, to kind of navigate as well. Because our intent with the liaison, with the symposium, was not only to recruit, but we want to retain our landlords as well. So hopefully with our landlord liaison, we're able to hire someone to kind of help navigate that process. We are currently utilizing incentives to retain and to attract new property owners. We're also able to utilize, we're utilizing the funding right now with the EHV vouchers to fund some of those initiatives, whether it's through deposits or down payments or utilities, deposits, and so forth. Additional outreach that we're proposing to move forward with is to continue with our annual landlord symposium to recruit and retain, And also, hopefully within the fall or by the winter, we can start having a annual landlord appreciation luncheon. That luncheon, that intent is to hone in and cultivate the relationships with our current landlords, and also to have some dialogue about, okay, what's working, what is not, what can we improve on. So those are just some of the things that we have done. Like I said, we're still gauging to see what the success rate is on those various different outreach. But what we did not want to do, or what I did not want to do, just to say, hey, Auburn is a tight market, so nothing we can do about it. So we tried to think outside the box in an effort to educate property owners, to provide them, not only to educate them, we were really focusing on, okay, what is the benefit for you to participate in this program? And to sum things up, one thing I failed to mention, when we had our symposium, Auburn has a lot of special vouchers. I can talk to property owners about, we have the wait list, we have the funding, we just need the properties. But I want to go deeper. I could not speak to the daily interaction that our partners that we partner with on the special vouchers that they encounter with their clients every day. So I had a representative for our VASH vouchers. I had a representative from the VA to speak about the challenges of our veterans. I had a representative for our FYI program, Foster Youth to Independence. I had a representative from the Department of DHR to speak about the challenges of youth that are aging out of foster care. And so that made a big difference. My intent was to not only to express to the landlords the financial benefits, but also to pull on those heartstrings and to remove the stigma. So I hope that after all of those different outreach efforts that we have done, we hope to see an increase in participation as well. And we're also going to follow up with all of those who attended to see what their interest is in the program.
All right. Thank you, Sharon.
Sure.
I think one really good thing that you pointed out was the timing of your symposium. So it sounded like to me you intentionally timed your symposium right before the issuance of additional vouchers to prep landlords for the issuance of vouchers, which is really important to try and locate landlords who are willing to participate, knowing that vouchers are going to be shortly becoming available to new voucher holders. So I think that's a great idea that I just wanted to point out.
Well, thank you.
All right. Well, thank you so much.
Sure.
Building on landlord outreach and success rates, we're now going to move on to jurisdictional agreements. And to speak on that, we have the Pritchard Housing Authority represented by Zulika Boykin and Sinetta Williams.
Hello, how you doing, everyone? This is Zulika. Sinetta and I will be doing about 5 or 6 questions in reference to this, and we hope that this helps everyone. The jurisdictional agreement came into play in April of 1997 between the Pritchard Housing Authority, Mobile Housing Authority, and Mobile County Housing Authority. All of us are neighboring housing authorities, and the Mobile County and the Pritchard Housing Authority have a smaller city than Mobile City. And we were having issues with families having support, and then those vouchers either being absorbed or doing billing to housing authorities that were really maybe 30 miles away from each other. So the EDs at the time got together, talked to each other, talked to the boards, and they came up with an MOU that would allow every housing authority to keep its initial family, maintain the voucher, while their participant was able to stay in the county or the city. The MOU was signed, resolutions were produced, and everything was sent to HUD for approval. When they sent it, there was only one question, and it was about the rent reasonableness and the payment standards, because it was a question as to whether or not that needed to change depending on where the person was staying. And fortunately, each housing authority just kept the right to use their own payment standard or rent reasonableness to achieve that goal. So it has really helped out. It allowed everybody's program to grow and not have to worry about absorption. And then also not put in the portability billing that's required onto the staff of the housing authority that the person would have been leaving or coming to. The agreement has also helped with utilization and success rates, because again, Mobile City is larger and it has a larger housing stock than the other two areas. The last question that I'm going to really approach is, what does the agreement entail? Because I kind of did the first two questions together. And so the agreement, again, it's in reference to you making changes to your administrative plan, you using your own inspectors for your inspections, maintaining your utility allowance, your payment standards, your rent reasonableness, and it does also have provisions for cost in case the other housing authority has to assist you with the voucher in question. And it has been very successful, and I think that's one of the reasons that we've been able to grow our program and increase our ACA contract. And so now if you'll take on the last two.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sonetta Williams, the HCV Program Director. Our program, we have made some changes with it, and dealing with this judiciary agreement, it has really helped us be able to maintain our utilization. The impacts that the agreement had for us is that it has truly helped us to maintain our utilization. We're the second smallest of we're the second largest of the three PHA that this MOU was put in place with. And our city is smaller, but Mobile County is larger. So it does not make us have to put everybody into one box. When vouchers are issued, they're able to go out into the county. And basically that has really helped us, because at this point in time, as I was telling Ms. Borkins in a conversation, if we had to hold all our tenants in this one area, I think we would have a major problem, because citywide, countywide, there's a bigger housing stock. And the next questions, are there any pitfalls to this type of an agreement? I really sit down and thought about this, and my first answer to that question was no. But then I thought about it again. It came back to me at another time, and I agreed with it, is that the only pitfall that I see with it is that I think at some point we probably need to do a little bit more, I guess, tenant counseling or whatever, to let them know about the difference in waiting lists with the three authorities. We may have them as a client on our side, and then another housing authority they may have applied also may come to the top of the waiting list, and then they go to that agency. So that means that we're losing a client, because they don't truly understand that their voucher can be used anywhere. So with that being said, I think the only thing with that being, we just need to put it out there a little bit more, that you don't have to worry about going from different housing authority, because we all are pretty much really under the same umbrella. But for our agency, I can honestly say it has truly helped us. Back to that question about the pitfall, we all have different family sizes, issue vouchers due to family sizes. And at this point, I think, I don't want to be biased, but I think we have a better voucher at this point. But overall, it's good. It's very good. So it might be something that you guys may want to consider. It takes a little planning, but you may want to just think about it and try to see with this help your organization, because it has truly helped ours.
All right. Thank you guys so much for sharing. I think, one thing that's important to keep in mind with these agreements, and to your point that each of the PHAs within your jurisdiction are able to set their own payment standards and do rent reasonableness and things like that. It is important for PHAs under these agreements to communicate, so you have a knowledge of what each PHA is doing in terms of voucher subsidy standards, as you mentioned, Sonetta, as well as rent reasonableness. Because the one thing you do want to realize is if one PHA under a jurisdictional agreement is setting rents higher than another PHA, it's creating one voucher being worth more due to the rent reasonableness than another PHA is under the same agreement. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind. And for smaller housing authorities or for housing authorities in a city that's really kind of trapped within the city limits, this can be something that would be super helpful to you, like it is to Pritchard, in that it expands the area in which your vouchers can be utilized and therefore can positively impact the success rates of your program. So thank you so much, Pritchard team. And so one of the other things that I'm going to go over real quick is related to rent reasonableness as it in regards to success rates. What I hear a lot of times and a lot of PHAs talk about is the rental markets are changing, the housing costs are much higher, and housing authorities are having difficult time approving rents at the same levels that the market is asking. And so sometimes this relates to how rent reasonableness is determined by different PHAs. And so what PHAs need to start taking a look at as it relates to their competitiveness in the market is if their rent reasonableness system is set up in a way that approves rent at a comparable rate when you're comparing vouchered unit to a market rate unit. And so several of the PHAs that we've been working with in the state of Alabama have addressed this issue with their vendor, who is providing rent reasonableness services to the PHA. And what PHAs are starting to do is approach their vendor in reaching out to the points of contact for their rent reasonableness systems and asking for updates on the comps that are being input into their systems that they're using so that their rents can be more competitive with the market. Sometimes if you're using a rent reasonableness system and you don't have current comps, you're not competitively pricing the rents in comparison to the market, which can deter landlords from wanting to participate in your program. From the conversations we've had with PHAs, it doesn't take that long, depending on the vendor that you're working with, for updated comps to be available within the system. And then the impact that this has on a lot of the PHAs we've worked with who are changing or having their rent reasonableness systems updated is it's having a positive impact on the success rate of their program. They're able to get rents approved at what landlords are asking and therefore are able to more successfully utilize their vouchers. And so kind of talking about success rates in general and bringing it into utilization, success rates is one of the what I consider the 4 key performance indicators of maximizing the utilization of your program. And so how I look at success rates is how success rates are looked at is how successful a voucher holder is. And determining that percentage of successful voucher holders on your program is extremely important because it can inform the housing authority of how many vouchers you need to lease. So I have an example here of what success rates look like in practice. And so if a PHA is looking to lease up 25 vouchers per month, they'll need to determine how many applications they're going to need to go through and then determine out of those applications what percentage of those families will actually be leased. So if a housing authority is looking to lease 25 vouchers and have a success rate from their waiting list, meaning 7 out of 10 names on their waiting list actually receive a voucher, and then 75% of those voucher holders actually are successful at leasing up, a PHA would know that they're going to need to pull 67 names from their waiting list to be able to lease up 25 vouchers, which is approximately 3/4 of a staff person. If your success rate from your waiting list or success rate from your vouchers that are issued are at 50%, PHA knows they're going to need to pull 100 names from their waiting list, which is roughly 1 staff person. If your success rates from your waiting list and the success rates from the vouchers that you issue are at 25%, a PHA is having to pull 200 names from your waiting list, and you're going to probably need 2 staff people to manage that on a monthly basis. So it's important to know what your success rate is, and it's equally important to actively work to improve your success rate, because the success rate determines how hard a PHA is going to have to work. You know, as the example states here, if a PHA needs to lease 25 vouchers a month and they have a 25% success rate from the vouchers that they issued and from their waiting list, it's going to mean if a PHA is trying to lease up 25 vouchers a month for an entire year, you're going to need to have at least 2,400 applicants on your waiting list. So knowing the success rates and improving the success rates of your program is extremely important to the amount of effort you have to put into the work to get those units leased up. Just one note on a best practice: if you have a low success rate from your waiting list, you need to consider purging your waiting list, because that can improve the success of those applicants on that list. This is just another example. If you're trying to lease 5 vouchers a month, you're going to need to pull 9 names from your waiting list at 75%. If you're at 50% success rates, you're pulling 20 names. If you're at 25% success rates, you're pulling 40 names. Just showing that success rates are important to how hard you're going to have to work to keep your program afloat. And then when you're looking at success rates in kind of a final example, what you really want to compare is your attrition rate to the number of vouchers you need to lease up. So if you're a PHA who has an attrition rate of a percentage that's resulting in you're losing 22 vouchers a month, it means you need to be replenishing those 22 vouchers that you lose monthly through attrition, which is going to mean you're going to need to issue X number of vouchers based off of your success rates from your waiting list and from the vouchers that you issued, and how much that's going to equate to in terms of staffing, just to keep your program at the status quo and keep your voucher program plateaued at a certain level. So success rates are super important, and to our spoke about some of their best practices there earlier. Improving that success rate at the end of the day is going to result in less administrative work to try and get vouchers leased. Final notes on success rate: you know, success rates can be improved through quality rent reasonableness that makes the PHA's rents competitive in the market, through landlord outreach strategies, as well as through jurisdictional agreements to expand the area in which vouchers can be utilized. So next, we're going to move into the payment standard strategies section. And for that, we have Kanji Drake from the Housing Authority of Birmingham District. Kanji?
Good afternoon. Thanks for allowing me to speak today to discuss what we did here at the Housing Authority of the Birmingham District to increase our utilization regarding our payment standards. So as it states, one of the issues is that the rental markets are changing, and the fair market rents that were being utilized were creating situations where a significant number of families are currently rent burdened, and those that are moving could not find a suitable place to live. What did we do? One thing that we did was utilize the expedited and streamlined waiver process to increase the payment standards, which can be found in PIH Notice 2022-9. All PHA requests had to be received to HUD by September the 30th, 2022 to receive streamlined processing. Any and all HUD approved waivers are only available until December 31st, 2022, unless they were otherwise noted. For example, the voucher tenancy new payment standard amount, the PHAs may establish a payment standard at the higher of 111 to 120% of the 40th percentile FMR and or SAFMRs. Under the notice 2018-01, PHAs were eligible for success rate payment standards up to 110% of the 50th percentile of the FMR. Under the HUD PIH Notice 2021-34, HUD requires a PHA to certify that it met one of the 3 good cause reasons for the expedited exception payment standard waiver, which included the utilization rate, timely leasing of vouchers, or the HUD FMR area determined to have a significant rental market fluctuation. Next question is, what other waivers did the PHA apply for? We also applied for increase in payment standards during the HAP contract term, the term of voucher for the extensions of the term, and we also applied for the CMAP scores. The CMAP waiver, I think, is no longer available for the HUD's expedited review, so it must go through the department's regular waiver submission and review process, which is outlined in the notice 21-34. The next question, how did the PHA approach this issue related to capacity? So, we, as many other PHAs, experienced a lot of staff changes due to COVID and other agency restructuring initiatives here at HABD. So, once we received approval to implement the waivers, from the prior research gathered, we already knew specifically what households would be affected. So, we assigned them to our housing specialists to process those changes for the respective zip codes and effective dates. We did have to do some of these retroactively because, again, we had a lot of staff shortages within our department. What impact did it have on the families on the program? So after looking at the higher of 120% of the 40th, 40th percentile SAFMRs, and up to 110% of the 50th percentile FMRs, we decided to adopt the zip codes and a series of zip codes consolidated, into exception payment standards. So approximately 700 plus voucher assisted households where their gross rents exceeded our payment standards have had or will have their income to housing cost burdens be applied at their existing gross rents reduced by the end of 2022. Within our available HAP funding and unit months available, our increased payment standards will effectively increase voucher households' purchasing power in the rental housing market. And our increased payment standards should also increase our voucher success rates and lower the amount of time that it takes a client to find a unit. The increased success rate should also result in lowering the demands on HABD staff tasks, including their requests for tenancy approvals, the inspections, re-inspections, voucher extension requests, and the rent reasonableness determinations. HABD's implementation of this waiver will also augment HABD's landlord retention and recruitment efforts. Our increased voucher lease-up rate and HAP utilization in 2022 will enable us to serve more families in 2023 and beyond within its annual HAP budget authority and available HAP reserves, while also earning a greater administrative fee reserves overall to invest in our staffing and services for our families, property owners, and communities. Next question is, how has the PHA adjusted the number of vouchers they need to issue moving forward after implementing the increase? So with implementing this change and after weekly evaluations, we will still to increase our leasing efforts. The 2-year tool has been a great help in reviewing the need of our voucher issuances. Because of the payment standard increase, our voucher issuance needs have dropped some, but we have to continue to keep a close eye on those, kind of like what Mike said earlier in the presentation. Next question, how has this change affected the PHAs per unit cost? Well, in April 2022, which is a month before our effective date of our increased payment standards, our average per voucher HAP costs were approximately $629. And as of May, when our payment standards increase took effect, we did a rolling 3-month average per unit cost, which would have made it an estimate of about $667, which is like about 6% increase. So we used the 3-month average because we are still processing some changes and updates to be applied to prior period adjustments based on the effective dates that we used. We used 5/1. And also within our available HAP fund and unit months available, the increased payment standards and resulting increase in our average per unit cost of 6% and the pending increase in voucher issuances and leasings are projected to increase our average voucher lease-up rate, HAP utilization rate, and reduce the amount of an offset of unspent HAP and protected HAP reserves over our agency's 4% threshold. The next question, how will the PHA be doing? What will the PHA be doing, to address the potential decrease in the payment standards in 2022? Well, HUD's exception payment standards, as previously mentioned in Notice 2021-34 and Notice 2022-9, expire as of December 31st, 2022. At a minimum, all PHAs existing voucher-assisted households who remain leased in their existing voucher units are to be at the held harmless policy from any reductions in the lower payment standards until their second re-exam, which will start in 2024. So at this moment, of course, we don't know what HUD's proposed fiscal year 2023 FMRs will be. So we amended our administrative plan to provide at least 90 days of search time for all of our voucher holders so that we can put ourselves in a position to possibly qualify for the voucher success rate payment standard up to 110% of the fiscal year 2023 in the 50th percentile FMRs as of January 1. So if we also, that's if we also meet the other requirements in order to provide us with our greatest options. After HUD publishes its proposed 2023 FMRs, and we, of course, continue to monitor our voucher success rates over a 6-month period following the effective date of our increased payment standards and housing search time, we will see whether or not we will qualify for the voucher success rate payment standards. If so, we plan to apply to HUD at the time we qualify, but in advance of January 1, 2023, when HUD's exception payment standards expire. Are there any other policies that the PHA has adopted regarding payment standards? No, not at this time. However, just to reiterate, we did adopt the zip codes, a series of zip codes, and consolidated them into exception payment standards ranging from 110% of the 50th percentile, 120% of the 40th percentile of our SAFMRs, and 120% of the 40th percentile FMRs.
And so to your point about the various things that HABD is doing is throughout what you're doing with your payment standards, it kept making me think of how closely payment standards interact with the other things that Pritchard and Auburn talked about, right? So payment standards will interact with your success rates. Payment standards will interact with jurisdictional agreements where you might have different PHAs with different payment standards, and payment standards will interact with your rent reasonableness. And so payment standards are one of those super important things that everyone needs to be aware of, and the impact that it has to your program from the utilization side as it relates to your per unit costs and your success rate, but also how it affects the families that you serve on your program. I think you mentioned that the increase in your payment standards has resulted in the reduction of 700 families who are rent burdened on your program because they're paying more than 30% of their income towards their rent. So that's a massive impact that payment standards can have on your program. So keep that in mind as you're looking at payment standards, and if you can do anything to increase your payment standards to make your units more competitive in the market, as well as reducing those rent burdens of the families who are participating in your program. I think those are all great things about payment standards. So thank you, Kanchi. One other thing I did want to bring up real quick about payment standards, one thing that some PHAs are starting to adopt is increases in payment standards specific for bedroom sizes. And so as it relates to using payment standards, it's important that all PHAs utilize the HUD tool of tools and payment standard analysis tool in particular. And through this analysis and use of this tool, PHAs can see a variety of things. And so what your screen is showing you is what the current FMR and payment standard is for a PHA, and what would happen if a PHA increases their payment standard from, in this case, from 95% to 105% on all bedroom sizes, with the exception of a one-bedroom unit, which would go to 110%. And what this analysis does is it can allow PHAs to zone in on specific bedroom sizes where you have a large population of participants who are specifically rent burdened. So when you're looking at the HUD payment standard analysis tool, in this example, a PHA has 54% of their families who are currently rent burdened by using a payment standard of 95%. What this analysis further shows is that for the one-bedroom units, where there's 44 families, 75% of those one-bedroom families at a 95% payment standard are rent burdened. And then what it continues to show after that is that if the PHA were to increase the payment standards for that one-bedroom or for that one-bedroom unit to 110%, the percentage of families by the time it gets all the way implemented throughout the program, the number of families in a one-bedroom unit would be reduced by a percentage from 75% who are rent burdened down to roughly 16% that are rent burdened. So when you're working on updating your payment standards, it's important to understand the impact it has, not just on your program as a whole, but also the impact it can have on specific bedroom sizes. And so payment standards are one of those things that are really, really important to understand the impact it's going to have on the family, the impact it's going to have on the utilization of your program from the HAP perspective. Because generally when your payment standards go up, your per unit costs are going to go up. And that information needs to be analyzed at least annually when the FMRs come out. So you can understand as a PHA the impact it's going to have on the amount of HAP that you're spending, specifically related to the per unit costs, which should then be updated and monitored in your 2-year tool. Per unit costs, I've talked about this on previous webinars. It's the most important thing in managing your voucher program. You have to know what the cost is going to be to issue vouchers and lease vouchers up. It's influenced by 4 main things: your payment standard, your utility allowances, your rent reasonableness determinations, and the tenant's income. The per unit cost really determines how many vouchers the PHA should be issuing based off of the amount of funding that you have available. And the data that you gather while you're analyzing the impact of payment standards on your program through the tool of tools payment standard analysis tool, that data needs to be used in conjunction with the 2-year tool to determine the impact it has on your program. A quick example, when you're analyzing the impact that a payment standard increase has on your program. This is an example of a 2-year tool, and what it's showing you here is PHA is anticipating the issuance of 20 vouchers through the remainder of 2022 and 2023. A lot of times the 2-year tool is defaulting whatever your most recent months per unit cost are throughout the rest of that period of time. So it's important to understand and update your manual PUC overrides by analyzing the impact that payment standards have on your program. Through an analysis using the tool of tools payment standard analysis tool, you can understand what your per unit costs should be going up by on a monthly basis by using that analysis. And so a PHA has a much better understanding that instead of anticipating a per unit cost of $589 a month, it's going to be going up month over month based off of analysis that's done due to an increase in the payment standard. So a PHA that might initially think, oh, I can issue 20 vouchers a month and be perfectly fine, needs to understand that as their per unit costs rise, they might not have as much flexibility moving forward. So anything you do as it relates to payment standards needs to be analyzed and updated in the 2-year tool so that you really understand how many vouchers you can issue on a monthly basis, because it's going to be impacted by how much each voucher that leases up is going to cost you. And so next we're going to turn to long-term utilization strategies. And so for long-term utilization strategies, we're going to turn it over to Magdalene Skreda from the Mobile Housing Board. And go ahead, take it away, Magdalene.
Hey, hi, good afternoon. So thanks, Mike, for inviting us to participate in this presentation today. We're happy to be here. So we're going to talk a little bit about our decision to begin to utilize some of our tenant-based voucher budget, our total overall budget in the PBV program. So we currently have a total of 90 project-based vouchers in Mobile, and our utilization rate for those vouchers is currently 98%. So we have 89 of those vouchers currently leased, so those units are usually fully occupied. We don't have a lot of turnover in the PBV units. This spring, while looking at our total budget utilization as well as our general voucher utilization rate, we made a decision to submit to HUD a request to utilize some of our budget to set aside 300 additional project-based vouchers. That comprises approximately a little bit less than 10% of our current utilization rate. So we currently have just over 3,600 vouchers leased. And so by projecting a set aside of 300 PBV units, that would increase our utilization rate by about 10%. We also expect to lease another between 200 and 300 additional vouchers over the next 6 months. That's a goal that we have. So overall, this is part of a more comprehensive voucher utilization strategy. So in terms of how we went about this, we decided to develop and post an application for developers to complete to request project-based vouchers. We chose to do a rolling application process because we know that there is significant interest in the Mobile area, but there is also very obviously a shortage of affordable housing units. And so what we decided to do with this rolling RFP was have an initial open period. And then we did very significant outreach. We posted with the county, with the city procurement websites. We did direct outreach to vendors. We did direct outreach to developers. We posted in National Affordable Housing and Redevelopment Authority association publications. And we did have a reasonable response. We received questions from, I believe, 5 very reputable developers. We did receive in this first period of the rolling RFP process, we did receive 2 applications requesting a total of over 100 PBVs from these developers, and we are in the actual final evaluation and award process. In this RFP application and our process, we developed evaluation criteria that enables us to review each application on its own merit against the evaluation criteria. So instead of comparing one application to the other and then having a very tight and closed period for submission of applications, we decided to do this rolling process so that we could really start to get a sense of the level of interest from our developer communities, both locally, regionally, and nationally, as well as really make sure that the RFP itself is, well designed, and that we're able to, make modifications based both on the learning process and feedback from the applicant community, but also as we continue to monitor what's happening in the Mobile County market, that we could make modifications to that solicitation as we are going through this process of, receiving applications. So we had an open period of, I believe, about 6 weeks for the first cycle of awards, and we did receive 2 applications from well-established notable vendor developers. So as I said, we're in the process of final review and evaluation, and we anticipate making an award for the agreement to enter into a HAP contract in the coming weeks. We have a board meeting coming up, and then we'll go through that actual process of executing the agreement to enter into a HAP. We did receive the applications that we did receive, were from developers that intend to do new construction. So, something that's important to keep in mind is that the PBV process is a long-range planning process. It doesn't impact your utilization rate right out of the gates, because you are dealing with the development process. In terms of the response, I've already answered that question in terms of the level of response. So we had, like I said, really pretty good interest in terms of at least just folks accessing the solicitation from our procurement website. Our procurement director reported that there were over 40 downloads of the RFP. We did receive questions, like I said, from about 5 different reputable developers with a solid history in the affordable housing community. And then we did receive 2 actual applications in this first round. I did mention already how it would impact our utilization rate, but something that I want to talk a little bit about is sort of what are the benefits of utilizing project-based vouchers beyond, the obvious projected benefit of increasing our utilization. When we use project-based vouchers, we have an opportunity to help families secure units where it may typically be hard for them to utilize their vouchers. So this also, supports the overall goal of the Housing Choice Voucher Program to increase access to opportunity areas, to lower poverty neighborhoods, and to get our families into neighborhoods that may historically have low vacancy rates and really significant competition for available units. PBVs seem to help lower some of those barriers to housing in opportunity areas for low and moderate income families. And then also, overall, it increases the preserved number of affordable housing units that will be available over the next 10, 20 years by, working with developers to make this commitment to the project-based voucher units. Another benefit of project-based vouchers to our participants is that it increases access to supportive services for tenants with our vouchers. So attaching the PBV units to properties that already have relationships with service providers or who have made the commitment to establish those relationships as developers and management companies come into agreement with the Housing Authority. This really helps support the agency as well in the process if we have our waiting list preferences to prioritize people that are eligible for the services that are offered. And then another, obvious benefit is that it just creates more affordable and mixed income housing. And our ability to attach the project-based vouchers to newly constructed or rehabilitated units really helps, like I said, guarantee that future source of stable income for the development, but also helps the Housing Authority create sort of a preserved amount of affordable housing within its community. So it's a way to really ensure that we're constantly expanding and being mindful of the ongoing need for affordable housing in our market.
I do want to point out 2 things that you mentioned that I think were great points that you touched on, is that you can use project-based vouchers to deconcentrate poverty by putting vouchers in different areas of higher opportunity for families, which is a very important thing. But you also touched on The fact that using project-based vouchers and awarding those vouchers to developers who are going to be providing on-site services that otherwise wouldn't be provided to a regular voucher holder is absolutely an excellent benefit to project basing. I think we all know that there's limited support for families as it relates to being able to provide services outside of FSS. So I think using PBVs to provide those additional services and leveraging it that way is a great use, or another excellent reason why PHA should be considering project-based vouchering. So I just wanted to retouch on those points because I think those are great opportunities. So thank you. All right. And in terms of other long-term strategies for boosting utilization and addressing utilization is portability. And so today we have from the Foley Housing Authority, Talisha Pace and Joy Dumas to talk about how the Foley Housing Authority addresses portability.
Hi, everyone. I'm Talisha Pace. I have Joy Dumas here next to me. She'll be discussing some of the topics that we'll be talking about with portability. One of our issues that we had, the PHA's jurisdiction is nearly in a tourist area. So we have portabilities coming to us all the time. Also, we recently completed a Section 22 conversion in which project-based vouchers will be assigned to for when the property is redeveloped. What did the PHA do to address this issue? To be able to better assist the residents in the community, the PHA began administering ports. How has administering ports affected the PHA? By us administering the portabilities, it increased our staff with the administrative fees being added. It also helped out with the budget because we could put that towards that person's salary. So there's different ways that it affected us. How does the PHA track portability payments? We basically set up a different authority in our software system, which helped us keep a close eye on the portability payments that we made versus the payments that we're supposed to receive. It also helped the accountants to have access to see how much we're paying for portabilities each month. What advice does the PHA have for other PHAs that are considering starting to administer ports?
Okay, so to address this question, based on when you or your PHA is wanting to administer the ports, is to make sure that if your housing authority is wanting to port out one of your participants, to make sure that when they port out, to reach out to the other housing authority to get all of their payment standards for each bedroom size. Because once the portability comes to the receiving housing authority, their situations sometimes can change. Sometimes they can decrease in family because they decide not to come, or they will increase and have someone that will come with them. Once this happens, it could put the initial housing authority in a financial bind because they're not prepared to be able to start paying that higher payment standard. So when you're looking at it, just make sure you ask all of that and go with the highest payment standard they have to be able to see if your housing authorities can afford to send the participant to that receiving housing authority.
How did the PHA set up operations to address increasing caseloads due to an increase in ports? Well, we have a designated person that deals strictly with portabilities. They do the billing, they send out the invoices, they make sure they receive the payments. So basically by us having the administrative fees coming in and having a designated person handling the portabilities, it really helped us be able to keep track on the payments and everything like that. Did you have any more questions for me, Mike?
Yeah, so one of the things you mentioned is that the way you track your portabilities in your software is by setting up kind of a different authority. What kind of software are you, or what is the software system you're using that's allowing you to do that? That sounds very interesting.
SAC software.
SAC, okay. That's SACS, right? Or SASC?
SACS.
All right. Thank you, guys. And so
You're
portability is another one of those things that you can utilize to help your utilization in different ways, right? So there's really two sides of the coin for portability. It's if you're absorbing ports, you're immediately boosting your utilization, or if you're administering them, you're bringing in new administrative revenue and therefore being able to issue new vouchers from your waiting list and assist your own community. Portability is one of those things that each PHA needs to assess individually to see what works best for you. But it's important to keep in mind that when you're looking at your program and looking at what you need to be doing as it relates to the utilization, is to look at portability as a way to benefit your utilization either one way or another. And so it's important to have a strategy with how you want to address portability and project-based vouchers. So you've got long-term strategies to consider as it relates to project-based vouchers and portability. And I also added in here another long-term strategy to be aware of and to plan for as it relates to the utilization of your program is any public housing conversion activities. So when you're looking at something like RAD, if you're converting any of your public housing properties from public housing to RAD project-based vouchers, it's going to have an impact on the utilization of your program. RAD specifically will increase a PHA's per unit cost if the property is going to go through a relocation, demo, or rehab, or if you're doing a rehab in place or not a rehab at all, doing like a RAD-o-matic type thing as it relates to converting your public housing, your per unit costs are likely to go down from a utilization standpoint if you're doing a conversion in place. And so as it relates back to your two-year tool, when it comes to long-term strategies on PBV, is when you're planning for PBVs coming online, you want to be aware of when new project-based voucher properties are coming online within your program. What you see in front of you is PHA that's got a lot of PBVs coming online here in late 2022 and early 2023. And so you need to account for those new PBV vouchers becoming available and coming online for your program so that you make sure you have enough available HAP to cover any increased costs from the lease up of those PBV units, as well as making sure you have those vouchers available. In planning those PBVs out, you also need to look into, I know, dare I say 2024, it's the middle of 2022, but yes, I'm going to talk about 2024. So if you're planning PBVs in 2022 as well as 2023 and 2024, you need to account for those vouchers to be utilized at some point in your two-year tool so that you can understand the projected impact it's going to have on your reserves at the end of a year. So in this scenario, a PHA that's PBVing a lot of units at the end of 2022 and 2023, as well as in 2024, they're now projecting a shortfall at some point or by the end of 2024 because they're going to be doing so much PBV leasing, which means the number of vouchers they need to issue is going to be reduced. So when you're looking at utilization as a whole, you need to be understanding these long-term strategies as it relates to portability and or PBVs and the impact that that's going to have on your program. So this last kind of section that we'll talk about here are some of best practices and things to consider moving into 2023, because albeit, like I mentioned earlier, it's August of 2022, but pretty much everything you're doing right now is to maximize what's going to happen here coming in 2023. And so actually the best practice that PHA should be adopting when you're talking about the utilization of your program and the impact it has on your operations is work with your field office. You need to make sure that you're working with your field office. They are a partner of yours and they have a lot of experience and can provide feedback and understanding and assistance to the PHA, and they're a partner for you. So Best practice number one is to work with your field office when you're thinking and looking at your utilization of your program and plan that out with your field office and develop that relationship to make sure that you can get the support you need from the field office and that they know what you're working towards and what your challenges and barriers are, so that nothing is coming as a surprise. Having a good open relationship with field offices is going to be one of the most important best practices that all PHAs can have. In terms of second best practice is utilize the HUD 2-year tool, and I can't say this enough. The 2-year tool should be used to determine how your program operates. And here in a couple slides, I'll kind of go through how the 2-year tool impacts your operations and vice versa. Your tool is there for you to make a plan for what you need to do moving forward through the rest of 2022 and in 2023, because your utilization is directly impacted by all operational decisions that you make. Starting the planning process to have an awesome 2023. You need to know what your data is showing you for your 2-year tool. Your success rate. Your success rate is going to tell you how many vouchers you should be issuing, because your success rate is going to tell you out of X number of vouchers, how many of those vouchers are leasing up. If you do not know how successful your vouchers are, you don't know how many you should be issuing. If your success rate is very low from your waiting list, purge your waiting list in 2022 so that in 2023 you're pulling names and not wasting a bunch of time and effort at pulling 100 names to be able to issue 25 vouchers. That's not an efficient use of your time or your staff's time. We all have limited resources in the work that we're doing and trying to improve the utilizations of our program. And so knowing the success rates of your voucher holders and knowing that success rate of your waiting list is extremely important for you to understand how many vouchers are actually going to lease up and how many names you need to pull from a waiting list to get those vouchers leased. Knowing your turnover rate. So your turnover rate in your 2-year tool gives you your attrition, right? It tells you on average how many vouchers you're using or how many vouchers you're losing on a monthly basis. Oftentimes you're using a 2-year tool that is reflecting a date and time and pick of how many EOPs you've completed, and it's not necessarily an accurate turnover rate. So it's important as a PHA to look at the HCV data dashboard. So if you Google HCV data dashboard and look through the slides, you can find your PHA by selecting your state and then your PHA code, and you can see what your attrition rate or your turnover rate is over an 18-month period. So knowing what your turnover rate is important because it's going to tell you how many vouchers you're going to lose on a monthly basis, which should then correlate to, if I know I'm losing 22 vouchers a month, I know I need to lease 22 vouchers a month to just keep my program stable. Knowing your turnover rate is extremely important to maximizing your utilization because it tells you, again, how many vouchers you need to be issuing. Step 3 is knowing how long it takes your vouchers to actually lease up. Does it take 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 120 days? Using the success rate tracking tool that's built into the 2-year tool is a great way to track your lease up rate in terms of how long it takes. Or if your software allows you to, you can pull that data from your software. The only software that I know off the top of my head that actually tracks that both the success rate and how long it takes a voucher to lease up is Yardi. So if you're using something other than Yardi and you can pull that data, please let me know so that we can inform other PHAs and they can utilize that information as well. And then the last thing is, what is your puck going to be moving into 2023? Knowing what your puck's going to go to is going to be extremely important in determining how many vouchers you are going to be able to issue based off of how much funding you're going to have available and what your cost is going to be. So be on the lookout for the 2023 FMRs. I think I saw something the other day in terms of a notice published about the 2023 FMRs that you can review and comment on, but it's important to understand the impact that 2023 FMRs are going to have on your program moving into next year. Next steps are knowing what's coming up. Do you have any public housing conversion activities taking place? Are you doing any Section 18, Section 22 RAD conversions in which you're adding new vouchers to your program? If you are, you need to plan for how that's going to impact the utilization of your program in 2023. For example, if you closed a RAD deal in 2022, it's going to start in January. It's going to hit your utilization in January of 2023. If you are doing any Section 18 or Section 22 conversions or any other type of conversion activity that results in the receipt of tenant protection vouchers, those are going to be additional vouchers that are added to your baseline in 2023. Even here, if you're doing any Section 18 or Section 22 where you're getting TPVs or any affordable housing opt-outs, if you get new TPVs, it's going to change your ACC. So start planning for any conversion activities that you have coming online in the next year and a half. As it relates to PBVs, do you have PBVs that are going to be coming online in 2023? Do you have AHAPs that are coming available to go under a HAP contract sometime in 2023? And if so, or in 2023 and 2024, if so, know what months you're anticipating the leasing to start taking place for those PBV units. And then also look at what your strategy is going to be about portability. Knowing how many vouchers you have that you're going to issue, knowing how many PBVs, knowing any conversions that you have coming on, is it time to rethink your strategy on portability? Is it time to consider administering ports? Or if you're on the other side of that, if you're a PHA that has a lot of your ports being administered by other PHAs, you need to be aware of any ports that you have that you're being billed for being absorbed. I know that it's a common practice for a lot of PHAs to absorb ports at the end of a calendar year or a beginning of a calendar year. So if you have a lot of your ports that are being administered by other PHAs, communicate with them and see if they're intending on absorbing those ports, because it could have a negative impact on the utilization of your program and therefore result in you maybe needing to issue more vouchers, because your vouchers that you're reflecting in your UMLs in the 2-year tool could be gone if they're absorbed at the end of this year or early next year. So be aware of what's going on with ports as it relates to your strategy for administering ports, as well as having your ports that another PHA may be administering get absorbed, so you're not caught off guard trying to do a lot more leasing than you anticipate. So having that communication with other PHAs is going to be extremely important to having an awesome 2023. Step 3 is knowing how to address your payment standards. So Kenji had mentioned this earlier in looking at exemption payment standards and success rate payment standards and small area FMRs. So the HCV guidebook has good information as it relates to how to utilize these options as it relates to payment standards. So review what your options are, because in 2023, those FMRs are going to come out. We're not really certain what those are going to look like at this point. If you've been a PHA that's adopted the 2022 FMRs at 120%, you need to have a plan for what you're going to do next year. It may be, especially if your FMRs in 2023 go down or are less than what they are now at 120. You need to start preparing for what that's going to look like and what that's going to mean to your program next year. Also be prepared for, under kind of that umbrella, if your 2023 FMRs come out and you have to go back within that basic range of 90 to 110% of the payment standard, know what your options are if your payment standards decrease. And so PIH Notice 2018-1 gives you what those 3 options are and how you can apply those to your administrative plan to adopt those specific policies. So your 3 options are: you can have a hold harmless where there's no reduction in subsidy as long as the family continues to receive voucher assistance in that specific unit. A gradual reduction in subsidy phasing in over a period of time. I've never seen any PHA do that, but if that's something you would need to do, That's something you could consider, or implement a payment standard reduction at the second annual reexamination following the decrease. So those are your three options should you go back into the 109 or the 90 and 110% range, and it results in a decrease in your payment standard from what it is here in 2022. Step 4 is knowing what policies you need to update in your administrative plan. As mentioned earlier, landlord incentives is something that can improve your success rate and something PHAs should be looking at. PIH Notice 2022-18 provides information on using administrative fees for landlord incentives or landlord retention or security deposits, utility deposits, things like that. Review that notice and determine if that's something that would be appealing to your PHA. And I know a lot of PHAs say, you know, there's not admin fee available for me to give incentives to landlords, and I'm already am not getting enough admin fee. If you think of admin fee in the amount of work you have to do, there's a nexus between success rates and the cost of doing the work, right? If your success rate is super low and you're at 25% success rates and you don't have any incentives, it means your team is working 3 or 4 times harder than they necessarily would have to if you had a better success rate at, say, 75%. So if there's a way to incentivize landlords to participate in your program that would be helpful to your PHA, think about what that could do to your success rate. It could mean your staff's not having to work as hard, you're not pulling as many names from your waiting list, you're not issuing as many vouchers, you're not doing as much administrative work, which is reducing the administrative burden, and therefore costing less, because in the housing industry, you know, and in Section 8 program, time is money, right? So the less time you have to spend successfully leasing vouchers is a reduced cost. And so the reduced cost that a PHA has in having to do less administrative work, the more value an incentive would have, or the less that incentive would actually cost, basically. In terms of voucher extensions, something for all PHAs to consider, especially in very tight markets. Looking at your voucher extension policy is going to be extremely important, because if voucher holders can utilize or can't utilize those vouchers in 60 days because of the tightness of a market, it may be time to revisit how long you're issuing vouchers for. So administratively, you're not issuing extension after extension, as that can be administratively burdensome. And then also how you're going to you're going to need to adopt a policy. If you're 120% payment standard right now in 2022, look at what your policy is if your payment standards in 2023 were to go down. In terms of the 2-year tool, as I mentioned earlier, the tool is there to help you make informed decisions on your staffing and your operations. Utilization and operations go hand in hand. PHAs here in August need to plan for what you need to do to maximize your utilization in 2023. The 2-year tool is what you should use, because it tells you how many vouchers you need to issue, which is going to tell you how many names you need to pull on your waiting list. It helps you on the eligibility side, because you'll know how many names from the waiting list you have to go through to determine eligible families for. Your housing quality standards, or your HQS, is whatever your operations are as it relates to how long it takes to get an inspection completed, affects the utilization. The longer it takes you to get an inspection completed, the longer it takes a voucher to be leased up. And so if you're looking at your operations as it relates to these things, specifically for waiting list eligibility and HQS, for HQS, whatever your operational procedures are for how long it takes to get an inspection done affects how quickly a voucher can lease up. So look at what your policy is, or not your policy, look at what your procedures are on HQS, because the shorter amount of time it takes you to get an inspection completed, the quicker you could potentially be leasing a family up. On the policy side of HQS, if you have additional policies above and beyond the normal HQS regulations that make it more difficult for a unit to pass inspection may potentially also have an effect on your utilization, because it may be requiring landlords to do things above and beyond what HQS requires, which could be preventing the speed at which a unit could, or a voucher could, be leased up. Looking at your rent reasonableness policy, as I mentioned earlier, your rent reasonableness ties into your, not only your success rate, but it also ties into your per unit cost. If your policies on rent reasonableness and the methodology at which you determine rent reasonableness is negatively impacting families' ability to lease up units because the rents you're approving are too low, your rent reasonableness needs to be looked at to determine the impact it's having operationally on the utilization of your program. Contract and leasing. So looking at your contract and leasing policies and procedure, well, looking at your procedures for contract and leasing, how long is it taking you to process an RTA? Are you requiring documentation that landlords aren't wanting or willing to provide easily? Are you applying barriers to ease of use of the voucher program as it relates to contracts? And for leasing, looking at how you process those documents will determine how quickly your families are leasing, which impacts the ultimate utilization of your program. Landlord outreach. If you are not doing landlord outreach and talking to your landlords or communicating with them beyond sending a check every month and reaching out for an inspection and all that stuff, you're doing yourself a disservice, because it's going to be negatively affecting your success rates. Landlord outreach is not just a call to landlords all the time. Be interactive and communicate with your landlords and connect to them. One thing I've said on a previous webinar is the level of service, the customer service that you provide to a landlord will impact their want and desire to participate in the program. Landlords, like the field office, are your partner. You need to build the rapport with those landlords. If you're not trying to communicate with them beyond just sending a check every month and doing your inspection and checking the boxes, you're doing yourself a disservice, because they're not going to want to participate and continue to participate if they're not feeling informed of what's going on there at the PHA level. PBVs have an immediate and significant impact on the utilization of your program. It's important to understand that. It's important to heavily consider the use of project-based vouchers for your program moving forward into 2022, 2023. Also, the impact that public housing conversions, whether it's through RAD or tenant protection vouchers, have on your program, tie into the utilization and tie into this 2-year tool. And finally, portability. Knowing the impact that portability has on your utilization of your program. It's kind of a wild card, whether you're absorbing vast amounts of ports, whether you're being administered a large number of ports. It's going to impact the utilization of your program depending on what side of the card you are on. So everything that the voucher program does operationally impacts the utilization of your program. And it's all contained, and it can all be monitored in your 2-year tool. So you need to use the tool to plan for how many vouchers you need to be issuing through the remainder of 2022 and throughout 2023, what your costs are going to be, how successful your vouchers are from your success rates, from your waiting list, and from eligibility, to make sure that you can maximize your program moving forward. The last kind of best practice in using your 2-year tool is when you're looking at 2023, you can get an idea of what your budget on your admin fee side is going to be based off of how many vouchers you're looking at issuing, how many PBVs you're leasing up. So on the screen, you see the 2-year tool in 2023, where a PHA is looking to issue 100 vouchers at the beginning of the year, then going to 50 and dropping down to 30. They have PBVs coming online mid-year and late year. And in the bottom right-hand corner, it's giving you a total number of vouchers that the PHA is anticipating on having leased by the end of 2023. You can use this information to determine what your HCV budget is going to be on a calendar year in 2023 by multiplying and doing the math for admin fee analysis. So taking the total number of vouchers, multiplying it by your admin fee, and then multiplying it by your admin fee proration to get a projected HCV budget. This can tell you what your HCV budget on an admin fee side is going to look like in 2023. Now, the prorations, who knows what that'll end up being in 2023. But if you plan for what you need to do through the rest of this year and next year, you can create a budget to determine how many or how much admin fee you're going to have coming into your program, what all you need to do operationally to get vouchers issued, PBVs leased up, and things like that. And then from here, determine where you need to place your staffing, because you know as a PHA, you're going to be issuing 100 vouchers a month for 3 months, 50 vouchers for 6 months with 75 PBVs mixed in, and then 30 vouchers the last 3 months of the year, and 2 more PVV properties coming online at the end of the year. So if you can determine what your budget's going to be and know where you need to place your staffing, you can operate your program more effectively, knowing what you have going on with your program by using the 2-year tool, by using the payment standard analysis tool, and looking at all of the aspects operationally that impact the overall utilization of your program. Couple of impactful things to think about over the next couple of months as things will start to come up. The inflation factor in the 2-year tool will come out at some point later this year. So know what impact that would have on your projected HAP in 2023. The 2023 FMRs should be coming out in October. And then being aware, if you're a PHA that has high HAP reserves, being aware of what that 2023 offset might look like. I believe the 2022 offset was 40-something%. So if you're carrying extra HAP reserves, start playing with the concept of an offset being beyond what defaulted in there at 25%, with the understanding that in 2022, it was a 40-something% offset. So play with the idea that an offset in 2023 might look different than what is currently projected in your tool as it's defaulting to 25%. And then finally, as it relates to the utilization of your program, if you need help, ask for it. Talk to your HUD portfolio management specialist. I also advise PHAs to develop a network of other PHAs to bounce ideas off. All PHAs are different and have different markets and different barriers, but you all also have similar issues and circumstances that you can learn from each other on. So it's important that you're all working to build a network of other PHAs and people you can talk to help cultivate new ideas that might help your program. And then finally, talk to your staff about utilization so that they know what they're working towards and the impact that it has on the full utilization of your program. Oftentimes, frontline staff don't understand that processing an RFTA quickly has a substantial impact on the utilization and the family, but your staff is the wheel that turns the utilization crank. So keep them aware of what your goals are, that what they do impacts the utilization of your program. And I think they'll have a better understanding of what their job actually does and how it impacts the ultimate goals of the PHA. And so with that, I'll stop rambling. And we got some questions in the chat. So I will go ahead and start responding to questions. Our first question, I believe, is for you, Sharon. The question is, what community partners did you have in attendance for the Landlord Symposium?
We had a number of community partners, some of those who were our current partners on resident service programs. And one thing that I failed to mention that I think is important or could help, and it was intentional, I reached out to our local government, the city of Auburn, and the mayor was, to let them know it's all about optics. So we needed the participants or the attendees to know, hey, we have the city support on our affordable housing initiative. So the mayor, they were all on board. Unfortunately, he wasn't able to attend due to health issues, but the city manager did do the opening comments. So they were one of our primary partners hey, we can say the benefits of the program, but to show that you have the city support. And a lot of those in attendees may not be familiar with the housing authority. So it was not only intentional, it was needed to have the city to do the opening comments to show their support of affordable housing. And not just that, I failed to mention also, I was intentional about the venue where we were going to hold the symposium. We didn't want the community to come to us based on who was marketing. We want to go to the community. So it was intentional for us to have the symposium at the Chamber of Commerce, which also comes with a lot of free marketing to everyone that's a member of the chamber. So I said that to say we had current landlords, previous landlords, landlords that we hope to get on the program, and current partners through our local government, and also partnerships that we have through our resident services programs. So I hope that answered the question. If not, please let me know and I'll elaborate further.
Thank you, Sharon.
Yes.
I think another question for you is what incentives, and maybe this is open to anybody on the panel if you guys are using any kind of incentives for your landlords, but what incentives are you providing to your landlords?
For new landlords, as of now, well, when we had CARES funding, we did have signing bonuses, and for new landlords or those who want to expand the number of properties, we did have other bonuses for landlords as well. Now that we have an MTW designation, and once we get our supplement approved, we're hoping to continue those incentives for landlords to utilize the program, as well as signing bonuses, and some, particularly with the EHB program, they can possibly use the vacancy payments. If there's a turnover with the unit, they can receive, and then if it's going to be occupied by another family that's assisted through the EHB program, they could possibly get EHB vacancy payments for up to 2 months. But we're still exploring other incentives that may be helpful as well.
Thank you, Sharon. For anybody else on the panel, are there any other types of incentives that you are currently using or have used from the CARES Act funding when that was available that might be helpful to the attendees on the call?
Mike, this Sonata, we did have it, but we exhausted all our funds for it. But we had incentive for landlords that would allow from our new admit tenants to come in to house them, and it worked very well for us. We spent out real fast on that.
Okay, what kind of incentive were you offering?
New, I think it was 500
Okay.
for our people coming off the waiting list.
And 500 for a new
And
landlord.
500, yeah, and 500 for new landlords. So
Awesome.
we set a budget, and I think we reached that budget probably in 3 months.
Yeah.
Okay,
We had exhausted it,
nice.
but it works.
There's another question in here about, and I think this is related to a staffing question. So the question was, have you thought about allowing interns to help augment your staffing? Have any of the PHAs on the panel utilized interns in any way that you found beneficial to the operations of your program?
Yes, this is Auburn again. We have utilized staffing more on our resident services side, but I have left that as an option, interns, as an option. With us being a college town, you may have some internship opportunities for someone in marketing or social services, but we have found, and definitely, the interns definitely would love those paid internships, and then having that on, that on the hands-on experience as well. But right now we have utilized more temporary staffing. That seems to be more feasible for us, full-time temporary, but we are open to utilizing interns with our ACV program as well.
Another question that we received was, is there a list of vendors that offer rent reasonableness software? I know there's multiple vendors as it relates to rent reasonableness. The four that come to mind that I'm aware of off the top of my head would be socialserve.org, Nelrod, Rentellect, and affordablehousing.com. All are rent reasonableness vendors that I'm aware of. So there's another question in the chat, and I'll just read this. So I'll just read what it says. So as described below, the importance of PHAs putting into place the waivers and practices in a timely fashion as described today can't be overstated, particularly in regards to offsets and unspent protected HAP reserves over each PHA's protected thresholds by agency size. To reiterate what Kanji had cited regarding PIH Notice 2022-9 regarding the waivers, HUD's deadline to apply for the exception payment standards, increase in payment standards during HAP contract term, and extensions to voucher search term expires September 30th, 2022. And that's a very good point by our commenter here, because that gives you a month and a half to apply for the waivers. And so one thing to think about as it relates to potentially using one of the three waivers is you would rather have those be available as a tool in your toolbox than letting it expire here in a month and a half. Even if right now you don't intend on using it, it is something you should seriously consider as an option to address any utilization issues for unspent HAP funding. Continuing into kind of the comment here, is one of the challenges of administering a voucher program is rapidly rising rental markets when HAP utilization and voucher leasing rates stall or do not increase sufficiently enough to avoid the significant offset in unspent and unprotected HAP reserves that they will not expand considerable amounts of available HAP funding in 2022. So again, to reiterate that point, is it's extremely important to understand potential impact of having unspent HAP reserves beyond the protected amount. As a result, continues with the comment here, as a result, not only those unexpected HAP funds would not be reflected in their 2023 renewal funding, but will experience significant offsets at the end of December 2023. And if the offset takes place, and that amount is lost, it cannot be carried over or used next year to serve the families. So again, reiterating the impact of trying to make sure that all PHAs are spending as much of your HAP funding here in 2022 to prevent offsets. It's another reason why you should, if you haven't, certainly now should be considering applying for for the waivers. All right, another question, and I think this one is for you, Magdalene. The question is, where did you advertise your project-based voucher RFP?
Hi, so the Mobile Housing Authority has a procurement website. It's actually linked to a business opportunities site that is hosted and managed by the county and city. So we were able to cross-post there. We also posted in, as I mentioned, National Affordable Housing and Redevelopment Association websites, or their monthly newsletters. And then we did actual direct distribution to the Housing Authority's vendor list, which does include consultancy firms as well as developers. From the prior history of PBV development in Mobile, as I mentioned, we have 90 current PBV units. We had a smaller list of regional developers that we also did direct distribution to. So we approached the advertisement and the outreach communication process from kind of multiple angles. which I really recommend, especially if you're doing a rolling RFP process where you expect to, have periods where the solicitation is open, you accept a number of applications, you close it, you review how many, units you would issue or execute an agreement to enter into HAP for. And then you reopen and you accept more proposals. So this way, using both local and regional, if not national, methods for outreach, you'll reach a broader market. And while Mobile is really, how should I say this, it's kind of a secondary market. It's not a big city, but there's a lot of federal investment coming to Mobile because it's a port city. And, for many other reasons, there's a lot of economic and community development there. Recent, DoD funding coming to Mobile, a national reach for advertisement. It didn't return a result this time, but we did get applications from developers that are not in Mobile. They're located in Montgomery, Birmingham, elsewhere. So, it's important to make sure you're not just advertising on your procurement website.
Thank you, Magdalene. Another question for one of the previous questions was, what kind of incentive did you use for clients coming off of the waiting list? Was the $500 for security deposits, or were those direct incentives to the landlord?
One part of it, if it was this Sonata Pritchard, if it was a new owner, that was his. But for the tenant, we were paying security deposits, and if they needed assistance for their utilities or something along that nature, deposits, anything like that. But for new landlords, those who were not on our program and we were trying to draw them to it, that was their bonus to do what they choose to do with it.
Okay. Thank you. Another question is, what was motivation for administering ports? Was your program overutilized? Most housing authorities seem to be absorbing to increase their utilization.
The motivation for us to administer the ports were because we were unable to house the families in our jurisdiction by us keep absorbing all the portabilities that came to us. We receive probably on an average anywhere from 5 to 10 ports each month. So it just depends on if they get housed. But right now we have about 67 portabilities that's on our program. So it was better for us just to continue to administer the ports besides putting them on our program. Was your program overutilized? Yes, our program was overutilized. We are going through a Section 22 conversion. And also we have a tenant protection vouchers that we are dealing with right now. So our program was overutilized.
Okay. And it's important to also, and to your point, Talisha, it's important to, when you're planning for 2023, and if you're issuing vouchers based off of what you're projecting, if you're going to be getting up to the point where you're almost fully utilized, that is a good time to start considering administering those ports. If you're a housing authority like Foley there, where you get a lot of port requests coming in monthly, you can build a fairly substantial portability portfolio to bring an additional revenue to your program. So that's something to certainly consider as a reason why to consider administering ports at that point. There's another question here about, does the utilization rate apply to MTW PHAs? And so I can't answer that. Sharon, you are an MTW PHA. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, we do have a MTW designation for cohort 1. However, we have not started to utilize our flexibilities at this time. Right now, so it's not a whole lot that I can speak to, but we're drafting or coming up with various flexibilities we can utilize. So I can't speak to some of that at this time.
Okay. I would just say this about an MTW PHA. I think I would look at it as if I were just a regular PHA, right? I would want to maximize the use of my available vouchers to have the largest impact on the number of families in my jurisdiction that I can. Whether it, applies to for CMAP purposes or not, I'm not sure. I think it depends on your MTW agreement, but each PHA is a little bit different. And even if you are an MTW, I would recommend trying to maximize that utilization regardless of MTW status or not.
And Mike, I definitely agree with you on that. MTW designation or not, our goal will still be the same, to maximize utilization.
Yeah. Okay. And then we have another question in here regarding offsets and understanding the impact that that has on your utilization moving forward. And so I'm going to change my screen real quick and pull up a 2-year tool just to kind of demonstrate the impact that excessive HAP reserves could potentially have as it relates to offsets. All right, and so if you look at a PHA and you look at your 2-year tool, in the 2-year tool under columns G and H, you've got excess HAP reserves, and then you've got an offset percentage here. When you're looking at your tool, what you're wanting to do is you're wanting to minimize the impact or availability of excessive reserves that would be subject to offset. So how the 2-year tool is set up is it's defaulting an excess reserve to 25%. If that excess reserve in 2023 happens to be significantly higher than what your default is in 2023, so in this case right now it's at 25%. If it were more like 50%, it's going to significantly increase your offset HAP reserves in 2023. And so it's one thing that PHAs need to be aware of and keep track of is if you're carrying excess reserves that are subject to offset into 2023, that percentage could be significantly higher or higher than the 25% that's defaulted based off of what happened in 2022, where the offset was at 42%. I think it was 42%. It was in the 40 percentile. But right now it's defaulting at 25%. So when you're thinking about next year, if you have these HAP reserves that you're carrying forward, if it's defaulting into 25%, I would recommend running scenarios in your tool where that offset is significantly higher so that you can be prepared for what potentially could happen to those HAP reserves if they're carried forward in a higher percentage than the defaulted 25%. And that's really one of those important things to keep in mind as it relates to what 2023 is going to do, right? We're thinking the offset is 25% and all of a sudden it's 50%. It's going to impact how many vouchers you can utilize moving forward. So being cognizant of that impact is extremely important to not only maximizing the number of families that you can serve, which is going to impact the amount of admin fee you can have coming into your program, but it also is going to limit your ability to maintain the size of your program moving forward, because once you lose that HAP funding, it's gone and it's not replaced through the renewal process because it's being offset. And if it's offset in, a significant percentage in a significant amount, you're permanently potentially losing the ability to house families. And so to go back to kind of what Kanchi spoke to about payment standards and the waivers, it's extremely important that you understand if you're carrying forward excess HAP reserves beyond the threshold, that it can have a significant negative impact to your program moving forward and for years to come. And I don't see any additional questions coming through in the chat. I know it's 4 o'clock and we are out of time. I appreciate everyone for taking the time to jump on the call today. And I look forward to seeing your programs being successful moving forward into 2023. I want to thank our panelists. Thank you so much for your participation, and everyone have a great afternoon. Thank you guys.